Greetings, everybody. Good afternoon. It's Macro Talk 2. It's Thursday, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's September the 26th, I hear, all day long today. And we have a potential problem brewing. I just had a message flash up on my computer saying I'm out of application memory. Don't know what that means. Sounds terrible. So, yeah, just cross your fingers that we get through the next hour without any catastrophe occurring. So, yeah, it wouldn't let me open my, Telegram app. So I can't talk to Bud. Bud, you have to wave at me if you need to talk to me. The Telegram app is not working, so I'll have to read the messages as we go. How's everybody doing? I'm so glad to see Ingolf is back with us, and Russ is here, David's here, Susan's here, Tony's here from a wet UK. Is there another UK? I don't think so. Let me see. We've got some great stuff coming up this weekend. Starting on Saturday, which is when the weekend starts, is Pazoom, 10 o'clock in the morning. I've got several things lined up for the Pazoom this week. But part of it is going to be a continuation from what we're talking about today. We're going to be going and looking at some photographs and talking about them. We're also going to be doing some equipment chit-chat, new stuff out. I'm going to be talking a little bit about this most exciting lens. I know I'm a little bit late with this. This is the 90mm Laowa. On loan from Susan, but I'm loving this lens. This is a lot of fun. Great lens, and I'll be reviewing that not on Saturday, but soon. Those of you who weren't here on Tuesday, I chatted with you briefly about my conversation with Lester Lefkowitz on Tuesday. We spent 3 hours chit-chatting about Volume 2, and this is a great book, and we talked about it at length and had a lot of fun. Good conversation, good book. Go to his website if you want to buy one. It's www.macrophotographer.net. That'll get you there. Button for you to press to buy the book. And let me remind you also that competition, you only have 4 days left. Remember, only 30 days in September. We're on the 26th one, which means you have 4 days left to do your submerged photograph. That is the topic this month, submerged. I don't know what October is going to be, but there's going to be a change for November, December. I'm going to do one competition for both months. It is a wild card. Anything you want that is a macro photograph, December and November together, and they're both going to be judged by myself and a rather famous judge. Lester Lefkowitz will be joining us for the judging on the 1st of January. So New Year's Day, we'll be selecting this mega winner from the previous 2 months, wild card November and December. The first prize will be a signed set of Lester Lefkowitz's books. And the second prize will be one copy of one of them, and the third prize will be the copy of the other one. Does that make any sense? Prize number 2, volume number 1. Prize number 3, volume number 2. There'll be a test on that later on. Okay, so what else is coming up this weekend? Tangent will be coming at 12:30 on Saturday. It's free for everybody. It's a 3D modeling, 3D printing type making talk. It's where we get together on a Zoom call and we talk and look at 3D models and how to make them, and we talk about Fusion 360 or whatever platform you're using. And I'm hoping that this week we're going to talk a little bit about hardware and new stuff that's on the market, and new printers that are out there, new technology, how to improve the printer you've got, that type of stuff. I haven't talked to Larry about it yet, and he might give me a talking to about saying that without talking to them, but I'm hoping we'll be able to talk a little bit about that. Also, some exotic materials. I think we might be talking about that as well. Again, I have to check with Larry first because it was my idea. I wanted to ask some questions about how you print with some of these weird things. Next week, we're going to do something different. Something that I've been doing for years and years, seldom talk about because it never really has seems to find a good niche to drop into. But we're going to be talking next week about photographing art. Something I think we all do from time to time, but it's an art all of its own. And we're going to talk Tuesday about how to photograph paintings or drawings or other flat, kind of almost two-dimensional artwork, how you do that and how you use your macro skills to pull it off. And then on Thursday, I'm going to talk specifically about how to photograph three-dimensional art, sculptures mostly, and how to photograph textures and surfaces and colors and use light and shadow and perspective, and how to compose shots of three-dimensional artworks. It's a lot of fun. I didn't realize how big my back catalogue of or my collection of artwork photographs was until I started looking for some the other day. So I thought it would be a good topic for us to talk about, something different. So that's next Tuesday, next Wednesday, and I'm also going to mention next Saturday because two things are happening next Saturday. One of them will be hugely beneficial for you, and that is AfterStack, where we're going to be talking specifically about the TK panel. I know you probably heard me mention we talked about this briefly when the other Dave joined us for AfterStack, but this time we're actually going to get into the nitty-gritty of using the TK panel, and that's going to be on Saturday next week at 10 o'clock in the morning. The second thing that's happening that's not going to be of any benefit to you whatsoever is there is a garage sale, whatever that is, happening in the house that I live in. And I don't know how that's going to affect me. I hope they're not going to sell the garage that my car is in, but you never know. I have a feeling that somehow that could disrupt activities in some way. So we'll just have to see. Let me see. The Walls Macro Essentials project is underway. Thanks to Susan Seaford and Amy Furman, who are the co-directors of this project. I've mentioned it before. The first time I mentioned it was last Thursday. I'll mention it again one time because I still need volunteers. What this is a project that is going to be done by me, Amy, and Susan, with the assistance of a group of volunteers who are going to look at specific areas of interest from my work in the past, and they're going to select the best bits of it so that we can put it together into a set of playlists so that new people coming to Macro will have a way to find exactly what they need, the best stuff in the right order, and you'll be famous because if you volunteer and you do it, your name will be all over the video that I make for each of the topics. Okay, so that's it. I need your help. I can't do it. It would take me the rest of my life to do it, but it would take a group of us a week, if that, to do it. So if you're interested, go over to the Walls app, www.walls- no, there's a dot in there, www.walls-app.com. When you go over there, go to the messages, leave a message for Susan Seaford, and say, I want to sign up to be part of this. And if you have a preference for an area you'd like to work in, like focus stacking or equipment or something like that, tell Susan. And Susan and Amy will divvy the work up and manage the project. And then when it's all said and done, I'll make the videos and we'll publish it, and it'll be good for everybody. It really will. I'm very excited about it. Okay, so what we're talking about today is a tricky subject. It's what is a good photograph, and specifically, what is a good macro photograph? Though I'm going to be talking a lot about what makes a good photograph, but not in the conventional sense. Well, I am going to talk about it in the conventional sense, in that I'm going to give you a list of the things that I think are important when I'm, for example, judging a photo competition. When somebody wants me to compare two photographs, I look at a certain set of very objective criteria to determine whether or not a photograph is good. But some of my favorite photographs of all time, some of my favorite photographs of mine are not good. They're not good photographs by any objective criteria. But they are good because they meet other criteria that are much less objective and equally important. So the first thing I want to say, because at the end of the day, I want this discussion to be encouraging to people who are new to macro photography. I want to define what we do in two different ways. There is the subjectivity of the beautiful photograph or the impactful photograph, separate from the objectively good photograph. And we're going to talk about them as separate entities. If you imagine for a second, if you have and this happened to me, it's an actual event that happened. There was a 12-year-old young lady who took a photograph of a caterpillar, and the photograph was sent to me by her dad, who was trying to encourage her. And the photograph was, you could tell it was a caterpillar. It was not in good focus. It wasn't well lit. Part of the caterpillar was cut off, and basically, from an objective standpoint, there wasn't really very much about it that would cause you to think it was a good photograph. But it was a great photograph. It was this young person's first macro photograph. So just that fact alone made it a powerful and impactful photograph. And I love it. I've still got it, and I still look at it. So that would be one way that you could be confused by applying objective measures to a photograph to determine if it's any good. Another one to think about is a professional photographer who takes macro photographs for a living, who has a permanent exhibit in a natural history museum of national repute, and notices one day that one of the photographs that's blown up to 12 feet across has got some transparency over an antenna that he'd never noticed before. Is that a good photograph? I mean, people pay money to stand and look at it, and it's been written up and lauded over by critics the world over. But this guy thinks it's a terrible photograph now because it's got a flaw in it. So, you know, what is the deal here? How do we decide what matters when we're deciding whether or not a photograph is good or not? Well, photography is both an art and a craft. If we look at it as art, then we have to separate it to some extent from the craft of taking pictures. If we look at it as a craft, then we really have to ignore the art, and we have to look at how well this image was crafted in determining whether or not it's good. And obviously neither of those is the right answer. The right answer is somewhere in the middle. And if we have time at the end, I'm going to show you a series of 10 of the most famous photographs of all time that are, for one reason or another, rubbish. That was a bit harsh, wasn't it? There are technical flaws in all 10 of these pictures, and I'll show them to you at the end. You already know what they are. You've already seen them probably 100 times, 1,000 times, and every one of them has a flaw in it, but every one is generally accepted as an absolute classic, and that's really the key, is that we have rules about what ideally a photograph should contain, and then the art allows us to break or bend or disregard those rules. Depends on the context, doesn't it? I mean, in a competition, I'm not really free to disregard the rules, because the rules are a method by which I can compare certain aspects of the work that was turned in. But at the same time, if a photograph is technically perfect but lacks any kind of spirit, how can you rank that as a better photograph than a flawed one that is emotive? Okay, so let's talk about then about the emotional impact of a photograph. A photograph, at the end of the day, to be successful, has to trigger an emotional response of some kind in the person that's looking at it. Now, this can be a smile or a chuckle or a grimace or a tear. It doesn't really matter what it is, so long as when somebody looks at your photograph, they feel something. And all of the effort in making a photograph needs to be directed there. We live in a world of highly technical work in macro photography. I mean, we focus so much on how we make our photographs, how we focus stack, how we get rid of artifact, how we light our subjects, that sometimes what gets left behind completely is, have you done something with that picture? Have you made a picture that is going to excite your audience? And finding that middle ground is key. I'll tell you that my portfolio, I have about a dozen pictures in my portfolio. They're pictures that I believe are good of mine, and there are only about 3 of them that I would say were technically as good as I could do. There are flaws in all of the others, but the balance is that the photographs are effective, and when people look at them, they feel something. And it's particularly difficult when you're photographing insects, unless you're showing it to people who hate insects, and then you'll get a rise out of them every time. So whether it's melancholy or nostalgia or fear, you've got to touch something in your audience for a photograph to be good. I wanted and planned and then changed my mind about showing a bunch of photographs from recent competitions, our competitions. I didn't think that was fair under the circumstances, talking about good and not good photographs. I really didn't feel comfortable with that. That's why I moved that part of the discussion to Saturday for the Pazzoon, where I've actually asked permission to use the photograph. So I'm not going to show examples of bad photographs or photographs that don't tick the boxes, but I think you probably know what they are of your own. But definitely it's important to remember that good is a subjective idea. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? Shakespeare said that, and he said a lot of things that were absolute rubbish, but that wasn't one of them. And it is in the eye of the beholder. If you think it's a beautiful photograph, then at least for you, it's a beautiful photograph. Now the trick is to get other people to agree with you. And one thing's for sure, if you don't think it's a beautiful photograph, it's unlikely anybody else will. So the craft is the part that is less ethereal, and it's easier to pin down. And let's talk for a minute then about the criteria, the ingredients that go into a good photograph. Composition. I always list it first because it seems to be the thing that people think about last, and it shouldn't be. I've talked before about my method for composing a macro photograph starts at the microscope when I'm cleaning my bug. Let's say it's a bug for now. When I'm cleaning a bug that's on a pin, I'm spending as much time looking at that insect from different angles and different positions with different light to try to find the composition that's going to work. You may have seen a photograph. Let me see if I can. I guess I can show some of my photographs, but this is where the application memory thing started to give me problems. I am going to try to share some pictures with you briefly. This is from a talk that I gave that has a number of my pictures that I don't like in it for that reason. But let me see if I can find specifically one that I'm thinking of. Wrong talk. Okay, I'll show you one that it's an example of what we've been talking about. Don't pay any attention to the stars. That's how I organize images to give a talk. That has nothing to do with my rating of the image. By any standards, this is a terrible photograph. The main subject is out of focus. I don't think the composition is very clever. There's too much room at the top, not enough room at the bottom. Shadows are crunched down, and it's just not a particularly good photograph. But it makes most people who look at it smile, and part of that's the name I gave it. But this is a good example of a photograph that works on many levels, though it's just not a good photograph. Probably one of my favorite examples of a bad photograph that I absolutely love is this is actually another example of a technically terrible photograph that I love, because I'd never seen one of these nymphs before. It's an assassin bug nymph, but that's not what I was going to show you. It was this one, which one I printed. I just love this photograph, though there's almost nothing objectively good about it. The fact that it's out of focus. I have glaring reflections in the eye, which I happen to love. The background's busy, and there's focus banding in it. There's transparency in it. There's everything about this is bad. Yet it's one of my favorite photographs. So there's just no telling. And the composition I find to be a prerequisite for anything else. If your photograph is out of balance, if it's crowded, if the picture looks like there is something that's been cut off or not included because of the way it's composed, it doesn't really matter how good it is from that point on. So composition is the beginning of a good photograph. It's not an afterthought. I do shoot for a composition, even if I'm shooting to crop to a composition. I'm thinking about that from the very start. Using things like leading lines, the rule of thirds, the golden ratio, all of these things are useful guidelines. to help you put structures in places that are pleasing, to have horizons at the right place and have them straight. All of these things are useful guidelines, but remember, they can be broken. I'm going to show you these photographs at the end where they've been just blown out of the water. So they're not really rules. It's called the rule of thirds. It shouldn't be. It should be called something else. But using them as guides will help get you thinking in the right direction. I talk about light all the time. That's what we do. We record light. It is the most important factor in any photograph. But whether you're using natural light or artificial light, how you light your subject is really the most important factor of all. Once you've come up with a way to position the subject in the frame, how you light it is the whole story. It is crucial, if you are photographing something that is clearly the subject of your photograph, that the area of interest on that subject should be in focus. You'd be amazed how we'll forget about that and not pay attention to what is and what is not in focus. Remember that not in focus is also an ingredient of a good photograph. Is how do you present the parts of the photograph that are not in focus? How do you choose those parts, and how do you display them? How do you light them? It's not just about the bits that are in focus. It's about the whole thing. Exposure and color are the other things that you've got to look at. I'm going to talk a little bit about color, but remember that black and white is also color and light, and just because there are rules about what colors look good together and what colors don't look good together doesn't mean that you can't have a breathtaking photograph that breaks all of those color rules. But we're going to talk about them in just a second. If there was one thing that I would want to leave you with from this discussion, it would be that finding a way to show your creativity and tell a story in 2 dimensions with a photograph is so much more important than perfecting the technical craft side of this. I see a lot of technically very, very good photographs that are just soulless, and those photographs are never going to satisfy. So work on the creative part, which means experiment. It means break rules, bend rules, try things that I tell you shouldn't work, and look instead for a way to be creative and to tell a story. Another way to think about it is that photography is a journey. It's not a destination. You have to love the process of doing it for that love to make it into your photographs. When it becomes a chore or a task that you have to do, that's when, if all of your focus is on the craft of the photography, the details, the perfection of doing it, that ruins and quenches a lot of the creativity. In other words, a photograph's going to serve you better if it is something that you love because it is creative, even if it's full of errors, than any photograph that is error-free will have on an audience. Okay, beaten that to death, but let's talk for a minute about color, though, as a special point. We don't talk enough about it in macro photography, though it is just as important in macro as it is in large-scale photography. Colors have a language. the way that we react, the way that people react to colors, is not very individual. It's actually much more common for us to have the same reaction to a color than it is for us to have a strange reaction to it. Red, for example, it's often used to show boldness, and it has a sense of evoking a danger, and it can be associated with anger. So red's a color that has a lot of power built in, just like blue does. Blue's a serene, kind of laid-back color, and pictures that use a lot of blue in them have that effect of creating a sense of tranquility. Yellow, excitement, energy, and it's also a color that is warmth and comfort. If you have too much of it, it's a bit jangly though, and that's another thing you have to consider. Is if your palette is entirely yellow, it can be off-putting. Green makes you think of nature, right? And things that evoke harmony, growth. It's a peaceful color, often refreshing color, depending on how it's used. Purple, luxury. It makes you think of I don't know, richness. Yeah. Do you use a lot of purple? I don't. I don't like purple. I think it's a bit too powerful in a lot of the photographs I do. I try to downplay it when I'm photographing something that's got purple in it. Monochrome, black and white, and variations on that. That is actually kind of like the absence of color. And well, it's not kind of like, it is the absence of color, but it allows you to draw the attention of your viewer's eyes to form rather than these layers of colored message that you put in there. We talk a little bit about colors and how they complement one another. And again, I'll tell you this just to tell you that it's something that I spend more time breaking than following. Complementary colors are the colors that are opposite one another on a color wheel. So your blue and yellow, for example, red and green. They tend to create a very strong image, oftentimes too strong for my taste, but these images tend to be pretty vibrant and energetic. So if you're trying to capture that mood with a macro photograph, think about a background that's going to complement the color of your subject. I've probably got one I could show you here. The first thing that pops up is a purple thing. Not going to show you that because I just said I don't like it. Oh, dearie me. I'll show you another bad photograph. How about that? This is one of my technically worst photographs, one of my absolute favorite spider photographs. So it was one of the first close-up handheld spider shots I ever did. No, it's not. It's much more recent than that. It's only about 6 years ago. But yeah, terrible photograph, lovely impact. Worked for me anyway. Won't even talk about that. That's bad on so many levels. You don't even know what it is. It's a spider. Don't worry about it. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was using color to tell a story. There are ways to evoke certain emotions that you can do just with color. And you know what? I'm gonna skip over that and come back to it. I think I want to show you these photographs first because I don't want to lose the opportunity to have this part of the discussion, and I have a feeling we might run out of time. I'm going to show these photographs. I don't think I'm allowed to show them. In fact, I'm pretty sure I'm not allowed to show them as individual pictures, but when I show you the screen, you'll know the photograph I'm talking about. These are all photographs that I think have major problems with them, but you can't argue that they are incredibly successful. This is Afghan Girl by Steve McCurry. This got slammed over the treatment of the eyes, the oversaturation of the eyes in the original photograph. Yeah, whatever. I mean, I'm not sure. I would call that a fault, but it was. It certainly would make you wonder whether or not a photograph this successful could be successful with a flaw in it. But this is another one that it's this one we're looking at. Look at where the thing is. It's at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, so it's not exactly on my website. This is I think a terrible photograph in so many ways, yet it's so successful where it counts. It's blurry. The composition is bizarre, having the horse galloping off the frame like this. But Richard Prince shot this after shooting a Marlboro ad, and this is a really, really successful image that has a lot of objective flaws. I'm sure you've seen this one from Henri Cartier-Bresson. That's this guy jumping over a puddle. What is it? Behind the Gare something or other station. I forget the name of it, but yeah, this guy's. This is supposedly Cartier-Bresson's most famous photograph or best photograph. Yeah, I agree. It's a fantastic photograph, but my goodness, it has so much technically wrong with it. Yet, what is it? What's he trying to do with it? He's trying to show motion, and how could you do that any better than this? Yeah, it's captured perfectly. But yeah, here's another one, incredibly famous and incredibly beautiful photograph that you could find 10 things wrong with the composition in there, but yeah, these are all famous. You've seen this one, Robert Capa's photograph of a soldier having been shot. This is also at the Met, and yeah, it's full of weird compositional twists. Part of the picture's cut off. The horizon isn't straight. It's blurred. Yet, yeah, it's a beautiful photograph. This is probably controversial with many of you. This is an Ansel Adams picture that I don't really care for very much, but pretty much everybody else does. It is so dark that there are whole areas of this that just have no detail in them at all. Yet, yep, famous photograph, full of technical issues. Here's another one. Problems with the shadows. It's not in good focus. This is Dorothea Lange's Migrant Mother. Yet, who can argue that that's a classic? This one, blurry. The sailor's face is out of focus. This is Alfred Eisenstadt's VJ Day photograph. Yeah, it's one of the most famous pictures of all time. So, what's the point I'm making here? The point I'm making is that these are all beautiful, great, successful photographs that have all kinds of technical issues with them. So, what is a good photograph doesn't really fit into that question of what is an objectively successful picture. But, the problem for me is I have to judge photographs in a competition every month. And while I absolutely judge a photograph based on its emotive power, for me, based on the story that it tells, based on a lot of the feely parts of the image. At the end of the day, I also have to judge it on the objective criteria. So I thought I'd run through them briefly and just mention each of them so that you know what the ingredients of a technically or objectively good photograph are. The balance and the framing of the composition. And this is, somebody asked me to critique their entry to the last competition yesterday, and I was looking at the photograph, and the main thing about the photograph that was problematic for me was its overall balance and framing. And that is not entirely subjective, in that other people would look at it and see the same loss of balance. I can't really describe how I determine whether or not something has balance. It's just in any photograph that you look at, you'll know whether or not it feels balanced. Using things like the rule of thirds can help give you a guide. The best thing, let me make one point here about composition and balance. Once you've worked on a photograph for any period of time in front of the screen, and you're trying to assess whether or not it looks balanced, you're unlikely to be able to pick up on any lack of balance. I think that you see that the first time you look at the photograph, when you open it in Lightroom or whatever. That's when you'll address composition. If you wait until you've been fiddling around with the details for 2 days and then try to look at the composition, you're going to miss, I think, a lot of the subtle cues. If you do that, if you have a photograph and you're not sure if it's well composed, show it to somebody else. I think that we get immune to seeing the compositional defects in a photograph once we've been working on it for a while. So have somebody else look at it for you. Leading lines and flow within a photograph is as important as the static structure. Having something that is in a comfortable part of the frame, it's balanced with the other elements of the photograph. It's real important, but also having flow so that your eye is drawn through the photograph in the way that you want your viewer's eye to be drawn. I was going to show another picture, but I don't think I can find it with no memory on the computer. But the eye is drawn to areas of contrast and to the brighter areas of a photograph, and you can use that plus color plus out of focus areas to pull the viewer's eye into the photograph and get them to look at the part of the photograph that you're interested in, that you want them to see. This is particularly important in macro photography. If you have a fascinating subject and then a diagonal line leading to a big white ball of overexposure on the side, there's a good chance your viewer will never actually see your subject. Their eye will be drawn to the bright area, they'll see nothing of interest there, and they'll move on to the next photograph. You only have a fraction of a second to make an impact, so plan the photograph and use the flow within the photograph to draw the attention immediately to what's appealing. Emphasize the subject. The subject doesn't necessarily need to be the brightest thing in the photograph, but it should certainly be the part that has enough contrast to attract the attention. It shouldn't blend into the background unless that's part of the composition. Did that make sense? Probably not. Emphasizing the subject can be very straightforward in macro photography, but it can be quite subtle in other types, landscapes, for example. Focus and sharpness. How you choose to use focus in a subject is up to you. You don't have to have everything in focus. Indeed, most of the time, you won't have everything in focus. As macro photographers, we think about focus as being something that's something you want to have throughout the frame. That's not really the way photography usually is. You have to select what's in focus and what's not. And that's important that you select that carefully. I was looking at a photograph yesterday that had the area of, first of all, the subject of interest was pretty well positioned, and the picture was mostly balanced. It looked good. The area that your eye was drawn to first was in focus, but there was a plane of focus that dropped into the subject, so that when you examine the photograph and you start at the foremost part of the image and you look at it, your eye is drawn to the rest of the subject. And if the rest of the subject is immediately out of focus, but there is focus behind it, that is very unbalanced and very disconcerting. So when I talk about picking a plane of focus, I'm not just talking about making sure that the most interesting part of your subject, say the eye, is covered by that plane of focus, but also what else is covered by that plane of focus. There is nothing more disconcerting than a band of focus that does not encompass your subject. A band of focus that wanders off to show background that's in focus is disconcerting. So think about that as well. It's not just what's in and what's out of focus, but everything else that band of focus touches needs to be done deliberately. Controlling depth of field is part of that, and it's a trade-off. You can crank down your aperture to a certain point, and you're going to see softening. Well, you're going to see softening from diffraction at any aperture. If you're using a camera that has an aperture in it, it's going to cause diffraction. It becomes problematic at higher f numbers, of course, but that is how you oftentimes with single shot photography, that's how you get your depth of field. And if you're using a very, very large aperture, you'll have a very, very shallow depth of field, and you need to think about that when you're thinking about focus, what's in focus, what's out of focus, and how quick does it transition. So we look at these things. I look at exposure, and by exposure I'm saying I look at the histogram, but I look at the histogram in the picture or in the context of the picture. What you want to avoid if you're looking for an objectively good photograph is you don't want any clipping in the highlights or the shadows. You don't want there to be any area in your picture that is overexposed to the extent that no detail is possible, that you have pure white, or underexposed where you have pure black and no detail is visible there. If you're going to err on the side of one of those two, then underexposed. You can get more detail out of dark areas, or you can imply detail in darker areas where you can't do anything with the blown highlights. Specular blown highlights are problematic in pretty much any photograph, so that's something to avoid. So I look for that overexposure, underexposure. Going along with that is the dynamic range of the photograph. There is something usually, but not always, more pleasing about a photograph that has the dynamic range well covered. Between the brightest and the darkest point on the photograph, you have lots of variation. That's the range in which your exposure exists. If everything is bunched up towards the right, you have a high key photograph, which may be very effective, but it's definitely going to have a narrower range of exposures. Same on the other end of the spectrum. So looking for something that is balanced is usually a safe way to go. That's what you're looking for. Not too many highlights, not too many dark spots, and nothing blown on either end. The quality of your light, obviously this is what makes or breaks a photograph. Not just the quality, but the directionality of it, and the type of light you're using. So we won't get into the details of it because it's basically the details of photography. But if your lighting is too harsh, if the image is overly contrasty, jangly, jagged, then you probably have a problem. Directionality is very important because it is the direction of light that gives the illusion in a two-dimensional representation of depth. It is how the light interacts with the subject that gives you information about its environment, and you need to think about it. If the light is coming from the wrong direction, it can obscure detail that you want to show. So we look at that. Color, accuracy of color. When I see grass that looks more blue than green, but I happen to know it's a species of grass that's normally green, that's a problem. You want your colors to be realistic, with the proviso that you can break those rules creatively if it tells the story, obviously, but by and large, unless it's deliberate, have things that are green look green. It's important. Much more subjective, but also somewhat objective, is having colors that complement one another, or try to avoid the chaos of colors that don't complement. There are colors that do not go well together. I won't tell them to you because you'll then have them in your mind, and again, these rules are meant to be broken, but there are some colors that just don't look good together. Avoid them. Contrast and tonality. Contrast is a double-edged sword. I mean, you absolutely have to have it to create something that's engaging for the eye. The eye doesn't linger very long on things that have poor contrast because we don't know what we're looking at. So looking for contrast that shows all the details without obscuring them and without hijacking the overall feel of the picture. Lack of contrast in macro photography, something you see if you ever get into internal reflections. Using light that's coming from the wrong direction will kill the contrast. That makes things look flat and boring and soft. A problem in macro. Perspective and shooting angle, easy things to change. It's another criteria that I look at. Was the height of the camera in relation to the subject optimal, or would that picture have been better from higher or shot from below? Look at that, and you'll definitely find that there are options there that we tend to think of things as from our perspective as human beings, from eye level, when in fact some of the most fascinating photographs you'll ever take are when you get into somebody else's or something else's perspective and you lie down on the ground to photograph it or go up in a helicopter. We're pretty much out of time, but I do want to hit on movement, because movement is a key objective criteria that you can use to your advantage. You can shoot things that are moving and freeze that motion, and that can be very ineffective. Take, for example, photographing a propeller-driven aeroplane. And I used to do this all the time. I love to photograph air shows and airplanes. your thought might be, well, that propeller's spinning pretty fast even when the plane's landing, so you choose 1/8,000th of a second so that you can freeze all the action, and you do. There's no sign of blur whatsoever, and the propeller is just sitting there like it's not moving at all. That is not an effective use of motion. Same with a flying insect. You don't really want to see the wings perfectly frozen in space. Insects don't fly well like that. They fall out of the sky when they do that. So using your camera to allow some of that motion back into the photograph is terribly important. I was photographing this guy last night. You know what this is, by the way? This is a parasitic cicada killing beetle. Yeah, I'd never heard of the thing before. Found it on the back door. Yeah, I'm going to photograph him as soon as he gets old enough to just drop dead. I don't feel like dispatching him. Most important thing, I'm going to stop, even though I've got other criteria to talk about. We'll catch up with them later. But the most important thing, if you can only remember one thing to do in your photograph, is tell a good story with it. Whatever it is, make sure it is tickling something in the viewer, and you'll do well. Don't get hung up on the details. Don't get hung up on every little thing, because when you do, your soul gets left out of the process, and you can't do that. So what is a good photograph? It's whatever you say it is. Yeah, so it's up to you. At the end of the day, who else cares about it? It's what you think is a good photograph. If it gets you excited, you've done a good job. And if it gets you excited, it is probably going to get us excited too. If it puts you to sleep, it'll do the same with us. Let's see. I want to say hi to some people, though it's that time of day when people probably are headed back to work. All right. So Larry's talking to Borderland peppers. I planted some peppers yesterday, thanks to George. Thank you, George Simpkins, who sent me some seeds. And I planted them, and I also planted some Portaluca seeds yesterday. Yep, I'm excited. They'll be dead within the week, but at least for now, they're planted. Larry's got mixed feelings on editing. So do I. Yes, Russ was saying that it's interesting to be here because of the chat, and he's absolutely right. I just wish that I could keep up with the chat during the live stream, but these days I don't even get to look at it till afterwards. But yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful to see the back and forth. Zeno says it would be interesting to compare how several judges, maybe 5 or 10, would independently rank 1 month's competition submissions. I don't advertise this, but I informally do that. I show your photographs, I show the competition photographs to a lot of people, and it is incredibly subjective. I find that people who are really expert judges tend to have a more formulaic approach to using the criteria we're just talking about. But in reality, when it comes down to it, it's so personal, and you can't disconnect that. It's a picture's going to emotionally touch somebody more than it is somebody else, and you can't get over that. So yeah, it would be interesting, Zeno, and it is interesting, but it is not particularly constructive. And you know, at the end of I obviously agree with the principle, because that's why I have 2 judges for every competition now. And yeah, I'd love to have 5, but can you imagine how long it would take me to organize 5 people to judge all these pictures? It would never happen. But anyway, let me see. Tony, glad you're here. Thank you for the compliment. And Pierre, I could have shown a couple of your photographs today had I thought about it in advance. You've got a magic touch with eliciting emotion with your pictures. Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks for the thumbs up. There's some discussion about migrant mothers photograph. Yeah. You know, I think what we'll do is at Pazoom on Saturday, I'm going to pull these photographs back out, the famous ones, and we'll look at them in some more detail. We can do that because that's a private meeting, so I won't get in trouble for doing that. But yeah, if you love photography and you love the idea of capturing glimpses of life in 2 dimensions, then all of this becomes kind of academic, doesn't it? It's not really important. We just we take the pictures we love, and that should be good enough. Okay, guys, I am going to I'm going to have to get on. I've got some teaching to do today, and a few other things. Bruce McCammon, I don't believe we've met, Bruce. Greetings. Glad you're here. I do hope you'll come back again. Emily from Portland, good to see you here, and thank you for volunteering. Thank you to everybody who has volunteered so far, by the way, for the AWP Macro Essentials project. So appreciative of you. Crispy B wonders if I have received any of his emails. I don't know. I have not, but I have looked for them. I don't know. I don't know what else to do. I can't find them. We can talk about it though. Well, no, we can't, because you can't email me, and I don't know how to email you. I've tried crispyb@yahoo.com and it doesn't work. Okay, guys, I gotta go. Have a thing in just a few minutes, and I will see you guys on Saturday if you're coming to Pazoom. I'll see you on Saturday if you're coming to Tangent. Otherwise, I will see you on Tuesday next week, when we're going to be photographing pictures. Going to be more interesting than you think. All right, take care, everybody. Have a great weekend.